Okay. You may wonder how I came up with Tricky Nick. So if you are still curious by the end of this, you can certainly add that in as a question later, but perhaps I will answer it as we go along. But first of all, I want to give a definition in order to prepare you for what I'm going to be talking about amongst these nicknames, for instance. And the word is allusion. Now, allusions are references designed to call something to mind, comparisons to help writers get their point across to their readers. They function as a type of literary shorthand, drawing on popular outside works to provide greater context or meaning to the situation that is being written about. Now, allusions can point to other literary works, such as films, pieces of art, mythology, history, events. Most anything can come up and be part of an allusion. But the writer usually needs to know that the audience can well enough understand where they got that reference from. Sometimes they're double entendres, for instance. And they must know that they will be likely to understand, the readers, what that allusion has to do with the subject. And that's what is so clever about especially 19th century nicknames of baseball players. Okay, next slide.
I'm trying.
Okay. There he goes. Okay. Cornelius Murphy, who had a couple of nicknames, one being Razzle Dazzle and another being Hoop Skirt. I really love this sort of one because he really sort of embodies everything that I want to talk about with others. Razzle Dazzle, if anybody remembers recently on the great Broadway show, Chicago, there was a song in there about Razzle Dazzle, and we still know what Razzle Dazzle is. Well, that also came from a 19th century play as well. But what I liked best about Con Murphy was about a nickname that was attached to him, Hoop Skirt. Good grief. Anyway, Murphy was born in Worcester, Mass. in 1863, and he was a pitcher for Philadelphia in 1884 and the Brooklyn Players League in 1890. He didn't have that very big a deal as far as a career, but in 1888, it was called a valuable addition to the English vocabulary. That was only Razzle Dazzle, but was even better than that was his nickname of Hoop Skirt. Where in heaven's name would Hoop Skirt come into play for it? Well, what you do is you go back to that time period to find out what they were talking about with hoop skirts and what was the big deal about it. The deal was that fashion statements were being made at that time, that there was this longing and perhaps some nostalgia for bringing back hoop skirts into fashion. Now, there were pros and cons about that, of course, especially cons because they were so difficult to wear, but it gave the inference that being nicknamed hoop skirt was that you were old-fashioned and that you were retro, you were looking back. And that's pretty much what happened with Con Murphy. Should have stuck to Razzle Dazzle. Okay, slide 3. All right, here is that quote that has to do with hoop skirt in Murphy's Good Luck. So it was prophesied that the strife for this season's pennant in the International Baseball League will settle here in a contest between Syracuse, Newark, and Rochester. All three clubs have expended a large amount of money in the players, and the salary list in Syracuse will foot up to about $19,450. And Rochester's total will probably equal that amount. Hoop skirt, Con Murphy, who formerly pitched for the Trenton, is being paid $275 per month by Syracuse, which actually wasn't all that bad for a few months' work. So good old hoop skirt. That particular nickname did show up in several occasions throughout the newspapers during his particular career on the baseball diamond. All right, slide 4. All right. Gus Kinnikinnick Krock. All right, so probably the letter K had a little bit to do with it, but I had no idea what Kinnikinnick was. But in this age of Google, you can probably find almost everything. And when you look up Kinnikinnick, well, that has to do with a type of common plant that was used as ground cover. Now, of course, turns out that Gus was an outfielder. And perhaps that name was linked to him because he covered a lot of ground. That's probably our best idea for it. And he probably did. So next on slide 5, if you would be so kind, Bob, if you could get over to one of my great favorites here, has to do with Long John Ewing, which is what we know him mostly at, but he was also known as Carmencita Ewing. How come? Well, at the time, at the pinnacle of his career with the New York Giants, he was 6 feet tall, very thin, and resembled the famous Spanish dancer of that name when in the box. Apparently, he had quite an interesting wind-up. And Carmencita was a dancer that was popular on the stage, particularly around New York at that time. And so therefore, that got connected to him. This is where you could have show business, be it stage at that time, plays, things of that sort that would become attached to also baseball players. And as we well know, baseball players were very often connected with the stage. Some of them even went on the vaudeville stage afterwards and during their careers at the same time. But on a sad note, in 1895, Long John Ewing was dying of tuberculosis at a sanitarium in Colorado. He spoke the most eloquent final words that a baseball player has ever said, unlike the famous line from Casey at the Bat, when Cooney died at first and Barrows did the same, as we all well know. Well, apparently with uplifted eyes, Long John whispered to his friends gathered at his bedside his one regret: I only wish I could have died at home. A real tearjerker at that. Slide 6. Slide 6 will bring us to Adonis Terry. Now here is an allusion that comes from mythology. And we all know what an Adonis is. It's not one that we use very much anymore, but anybody that was extremely good looking could end up with that nickname. And that was not so uncommon during the 19th century. It is Greek and Roman mythology, and it also provided a source for nicknaming for many players. But Adonis is a beautiful youth who was loved by Aphrodite. And apparently, I guess he was considered to be very good looking for his time. Not so bad looking even by today's standards as well. So, next one on slide 7. Okay. Fred Shore Shop Dunlap with Cleveland from 1880 to 1883. So he didn't really have that long a career, really. In several other teams, he did end up with Pittsburgh in 1890. He was a careful, practical man. In an early season game, he took his base for the 3rd time on balls. He lifted up his right arm pathetically to peekaboo vetch, saying in his best April-tinged voice, lame arm, don't want to hit the ball, afraid of fracturing my humerus. See? Vetch peeked and noticed the swelling above his elbow. What he was known for. I guess he made it onto, the injured list long before there really was one. Oh, well, poor old Shore Shot. Looks pretty good in that picture. I don't know whether that's the arm that he was talking about. Probably is. But now let's go to slide 8. One of my personal favorites, and yours as well, I'm sure, for anybody that is up on 19th century baseball, is King Kelly, the $10,000 baby. Whenever there's even a remote chance to insert him into a presentation, I will shamelessly do so. He was the greatest player of them all, and he said so many times. King Kelly is buried in Boston. It wasn't exactly where he expected to end up. He became ill while on a trip from New York up to Boston. Fell ill with pneumonia, ended up in the hospital there. He was taken care of by the Elks organization when he got there because he was pretty much destitute. He is buried at Mount Hope Cemetery in Boston, in the Elks lot. They did take good care of him. We have let Mount Hope Cemetery know about the importance of this man that is buried in amongst themselves, the others as well. He's not the only one that is along there on that line. He's buried right by the large elk statue, which is awfully nice. But King Kelly was probably the greatest self-promoter of the 19th century of them all. The stories still ring true about him if you are so lucky to look them up in the papers. But King Kelly was a one of a kind, and he truly was the king. So, but we will go on now to number 9, which is Jesse Burkett. I'll wait for him to come. Oh, there he is. Buttons Burkett, also known as Don't Get Ketched, which is a pretty long nickname. We'll stick with Buttons. He was also known as the original Crab. They did call him Crab Burkett at times too. Much easier that way too. He started his baseball career in 1890 with the New York Giants and spent most of his time with Cleveland. He's in the Hall of Fame. But according to David Jones, who wrote a great bio project article about him, on and off the field, this Crab, as his Cleveland Spiders teammates dubbed him, on and off the field, the Crab, who was cranky and unsociable, prone to challenging opponents with his fists and insulting fans and umpires with strings of expletives so creative that sports writers of the day could only reprint his repartee by omitting all the bad language, which usually made up his harangues incomprehensible. One publication rendered a Burkett tirade this way: "Why, you blankety blank blank, do you know what I think of you? I think you are the blankest blank blank that ever came out of the blank blank of town in this blank blank land. You ought to be put in a museum." As if that was the worst insult he could come up and throw at anybody. Burkett's most notorious achievement may have come in 1897 when he was ejected from both ends of a doubleheader. But what goes around comes around. It is of note that Burkett himself did end up in a museum, and he was elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame in 1946. Stop by his plaque, but do watch your language. Apparently by 1946, they'd forgotten all about things that he said that were probably never able to be published in any newspaper. But that's Burkett for you. And I'm not sure exactly what put him in such a bad mood all those times, but he retired just in time in 1905 to bequeath that nickname, Crab, to Johnny Evers. Slide 10. Ah, yes. George White Wings, Hard Gall, Tin Can, Teapot Tebeau. A not so extraordinary player, but he certainly is famous for his nicknames. He was controversial as a minor league owner as well, but with an extraordinary number of these nicknames, he seems to inspire the literary urges of the sports writers who were apparently impressed by something about him, because he was easy to write about. He was nicknamed White Wings by his Cincinnati teammates. But on to number 11 slide, because there is another Tebeau. Oliver Wendell Patsy Tebeau. He was George's brother. He was named after the famous justice of the Supreme Court, but he was not after the famous justice of the Supreme Court, but after his father, Oliver Wendell Holmes Sr., a prominent physician, a poet and a polymath, and a member of the famous 19th century fireside poets. But I've done extensive research on this. use of the cognomen, so you don't have to, but little Ollie Tebeau was not to be known baseballically by this lofty reference, but he is for all time known as Patsy Tebeau. So what about Patsy? Again, I did strenuous research so you won't have to also to find out about where that word Patsy came from. Patsy Bolivar. A party of minstrels in Boston around 1870 had a performance in which they portrayed a country school. There was a little fellow named Patsy Bolivar who sat in the corner, who was inoffensive, quiet, and generally well-behaved, who sat in the corner and pretty much did nothing. But the older boys took occasion to annoy the master in many ways, and when the pedagogue asked in rage, "Who did that?" the boys would answer, "Patsy Bolivar." Then Patsy was chastised for it. As soon as that was over, some of the older boys would throw a water paper at the master's head, when, raging in anger, he would turn and repeat the query, "Who did that?" Again, the answer came, Patsy Bolivar. The phrase, as many phrases have done, spread beyond the limits of the minstrel performance, and when a scapegoat was alluded to, it was in the name of Patsy Bolivar, an inoffensive person who is always in trouble, brought about by mischievous associates, the one who always was blamed for everything. And now you know, that's Patsy. So, knowing a few nicknames can come in handy once in a while. In November 1896, Patsy Tebeau received a letter from his brother George, who was prospecting for gold in Colorado, along with third baseman Wild Bill Everett. There's another good one, but that was probably shared by many. They had staked out 4 claims near Denver. They named one of those claims Chief, after Chief Zimmer. Old Ants, needs no introduction as to who he was. Crab, after the aforementioned Crab Burkett. And Bates, after Elmer E. Bates, a Cleveland baseball writer who also wrote for Sporting Life and was an original member of the Baseball Writers Association of America. Tebeau and Everett had a gang of miners working the Bates claim, the ore from which was paying at that time at $4.90 a ton. They realized they wouldn't get rich that way, but they hoped the other 3 claims might strike them rich. So, if so, George promised to pay Patsy a National League, would buy him a National League franchise. Well, I don't know about that. He never did. We know what happened to George as well. Now, slide 12 brings up another one. Okay, as there always was in these baseball fans. Oh, bring them back up. I want to get go back one. Yeah, okay, another Tebeau. This is Charles Alston Pussy Tebeau, not a relative. Oh, they're all on his own. His record was Cleveland in 1895, 2 games, 6 at-bats, 3 runs. That's all. What a pussy. So now we can proceed to slide 13. Charles Tit Willis. All right, Tit Willis was an outfielder and a pitcher. Bats right, throws right. Debut, he was with Brockton, Mass, Eastern New England League in 1885, and he played on 20 different teams, including everything from Omaha in 1889, and Pawtucket, Rhode Island, and Albany, and Minneapolis, and Lawrence, Mass, and Haverhill, Mass. He got around. He ended his career back in Brockton. His luck at getting on a National League team was a complete bust. In retrospect, though, what about that Gilbert and Sullivan song from the Mikado, Tit Willow, about unrequited love and the bird that plunges itself into a river flowing beneath a tree he is perched on, or the Urban Dictionary that defines Tit Willow as a foolish person who acts like a complete imbecile, an idiot, just a bad egg all around. Just more insults hurled at a baseball player. So you can take your pick. Now, there are other nicknames that bear interpretation from 19th century definitions. For example, Jimmy Bannon of St. Louis and Boston in the 1890s, known as Foxy Grandpa. Yeah, you can look it up. There was a cartoon column named Foxy Grandpa back around 1900. The definition of Foxy Grandpa: a wise, cool, older gentleman. So perhaps the wording has changed just slightly over the years. All right, on to slide 14. All right. Our personal favorite all the way around. So the Louisville Slugger lives on in the nickname for Pete Browning, also known as the Gladiator. He is legendary. He is mythical. Too numerous to mention all of his exploits here. But next time you pick up a bat, you should remember Pete Browning. You know, actually, even his given name was not Peter. He was Louis Rogers Browning. Yeah, what the Pete, for heaven's sakes. But Pete was also described by the no doubt highly deserved epithets, which showed up quite frequently scattered through various articles about him. Everything from Pietro, Gladiator, Red Light, Distillery, Browning. And in his own words, a rather unfortunate prediction of his downfall, and I quote, "I cannot hit the ball until I hit the bottle." He ended up with a life of dissipation, which finally brought his downfall. But he had a lot of really interesting nicknames. Now, slide 15. Now, not only players, but teams also had a nickname problem. Now, baseball writers just now were suffering for want of a nickname for Duluth, and every club has its name. Omaha has Omahawks. Milwaukee has the Brewers, still does. Minneapolis had Millers for quite a long time. Sioux City were known as the Cornhuskers. In Kansas City, the Cowboys. Pretty predictable. Lincoln, Nebraska, the Farmers. Denver, the Mountaineers. And now poor Duluth. They were begging. Will someone with an ingenious sporting mind help out that sporting writer, come to the rescue and save Duluth from blandness? I don't know. I never did find out whether or not they did. I hope the team survived anyway. So now, just a few others down here on the end, but number 16, George Washington Grin Bradley. I did find that there were a lot of players that were named after politicians, for instance, or other famous statesmen and people, such as George Washington Grin Bradley, although in that picture, I don't see any grin. And of course, we know Grover Cleveland Alexander, and there were several others that went through the same thing. But George Washington Grin Bradley, and I don't know whether it was meant as an insult or a compliment, because one comment that I did find about him was that, did you ever see a great overgrown, uncouth, ungainly, semi-idiotic country lout pitch into a small boy, scarcely to his knee, especially when he knew there was nobody in hailing distance to prevent him? Such was the case yesterday of Bradley, the pitcher of the Clevelands, who disgraces the name of the father of our country by having it in front of his own. I think maybe Grin was ironic. Apparently, he wasn't very well liked. All right, and number 17, Savage Tom Thomas. Yes, his name was actually Thomas Thomas. And why would that be? And luckily, they put Savage in front of it. At least they could differentiate. But he definitely needed to have a nickname. Now, any question about his temperament? Oh, what was it about Thomas Savage, the Archbishop of York, who died in 1507? I doubt it. Or Thomas Savage, the English interpreter of Indian languages at Jamestown? No, probably not. But why Thomas Thomas? There was a naming tradition among the Welsh, of which the last name Thomas was, to name the first and the second name the same. This happened quite often, and you will find it throughout naming culture and naming traditions. So that was not as unusual as you might think. But I never did find out why he was savage. I'm sure there's a story behind that. But Thomas on savage. Now we get finally to Tricky Nick. He is our last slide. And on number 18, I do end up with Tricky Nick. He was the one that kind of started it all for me when I was looking for some sort of a subject or something interesting to think or write about. And I came across Tricky Nick. This was Fred Nichols. He was a native of Bridgeport, Connecticut, was reported to be the first pitcher to introduce the drop ball. He did it much the same as a man would jerk a stone, and he bothered some of the best batsmen with his tricky pitch along about 1875 for the first time. Yes, I do miss Tricky Nick. A pitcher with a legend, a nickname that celebrates his pitching prowess. I'll miss those players who earned a nickname, a pet name, or a cognomen that celebrated, berated, or annotated their history. Certainly, okay. I lost you there for a minute. Okay, certainly though, heading into the 21st century, the art of the cognomen began to fade away. So we have very few of them that are on the same level as the ones that we saw in the 19th century. I think we lost a lot of imagination and a lot of creativity along the way. In Boston, for instance, we do have Big Poppy, and we did have the Flying Hawaiian. So we did make an attempt, but Splendid Splinter doesn't really conjure up anything more than a splinter or a bat. And I think we kind of lost the art of it somewhere along the way. For instance, in searching out other names over time, I did find one that kind of struck a chord with me. And this had to do with Lou Brown. Lou Brown died in 1889. He didn't have much of a career in baseball. But if you look into Total Baseball or in Baseball Encyclopedia and you look up Lou Brown, you'll find that it says that his nickname was Blower Brown. But I really have to take exception to that. And I don't think that it really was, because his eulogy, when he died in 1889, at the age of a very young age, the circumstances of his death, well, I won't get into it. But anyway, at his eulogy, it was stated that he wanted to be known as Hoss, or the horse. That's the nickname that he wanted. Nobody during his funeral, or even anywhere around there, ever said that he was Blower Brown. Who was Blower Brown? He was a celebrity in England at that time. He was a professional pedestrian. And he died at about the same time. Perhaps that's how things got a little bit mixed up between the two of them. But he was never known as Blower Brown on the baseball field at all. And I think that we really should change that in Baseball Encyclopedia and Total Baseball, and strike out Blower Brown and put in that which Lou Brown wanted. And he should be known as a Hoss if that's what he wanted. The only sketch that I ever saw of Lou Brown kind of reminded me of Hoss Cartwright. That's what he kind of looked like. and it is kind of, kind of something that we really should do for the memory of Hoss Brown, not Blower Brown. No, let the pedestrian keep that nickname. The same thing happened in the early 20th century when I was doing a story about Grover Gilmore. When you look in Total Baseball and in the encyclopedia, you'll find him listed under Ernest Gilmore. Throughout his entire career and everything that was ever reported about him, they never called him Ernest or Ernie. They called him Grover. Apparently, he was born Grover Cleveland Gilmore, but apparently the story goes that at the age of 5 years old, he told his parents he didn't like his name and he didn't want Grover Cleveland Gilmore. He wanted to be called Ernest. But the interesting thing is, the baseball writers never picked up on that. Even right down to his obituary, he was still known as only Grover. I think we could change that too. It just goes to show you, 20th century, we need to really brush up on our Greek mythology, references in film and stage and music and all that, and maybe try to find something a little bit better. When you look in the 20th century, you see a lot of nicknames such as Rabbit or Red or Heine, which I still find a little bit offensive for all the German players, and things of that sort. I think that they were much better at picking out nicknames back in the 19th century than we are in the 20th, and certainly in the 21st. I can't even really come up with something in the 21st at this point. So why the title? Why do you, the title that I decided that I would pick came from actually, it came from having a couple of beers at a bar in New York City during that convention. A few of us went out there, and one of the people that went along with us, I don't even remember who it was, had a political button on his shirt. And it said, "I never thought I'd miss Tricky Dick." Then, when I was going through the newspapers, I came across the story about Tricky Nick. And it just went rampant after that. And that's how I stuck with Tricky Nick right to the bitter end. So, if you have any questions, do you have any? I would certainly like to answer them.
Joanne, we've got. Go ahead, Peter.
We don't have any questions per se, but we had a few comments.
Oh well, that's even better.
You may want to write some of these down, Joanne, because they're little insights.
Really?
Somebody who I didn't he only had his like kind of email up, but I couldn't see the name.
Oh, okay.
Somebody suggested or said that Grin Bradley used to put baseballs in a vice before a game to soften them.
I like it. I like it. He sounds like a mean man with a baseball.
And John Gregory added in that he thought that Patsy Tebeau looked like a character from the movie Animal House.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I could go along with that.
Marjorie Adams had an interesting comment here.
Yeah.
That, my great grandfather, as you know, is Doc Adams.
Doc, yes.
Actually has two, and well, he's a doctor, right? He was a doctor, medical doctor, but he actually also has two letters from Oliver Wendell Holmes.
Ooh.
So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. The thing is about the nicknames and all. I'm sure that a lot of it had to do with the fewer options that people had back then in order to convey information. You had your newspapers, let's say, and that's pretty much it, how the information was passed around. The writers back then, I think that they wrote some fantastic stuff. I've read a lot of like game reports as well that had a lot of mythology references that were mixed in with it that you would not know unless you knew a little bit of Greek mythology. That, and then also the fact that that a lot of players were celebrated with poetry. King Kelly being one that I had quite a bit with that one. I had done a presentation in Hingham, Mass. A few years ago at the house that was owned by King Kelly. And it was really great just to go in there and just imagine, to me, it was akin to, going to Mark Twain's house in Hartford. But and the thing is, I brought a poem along. And I decided I would have everybody do the chorus on the poem. And the kids got the biggest kick out of it because the chorus was an echo and it was like Kel. But if you said it fast enough, it was like hell. And the kids really felt they were getting away with saying a swear word in public. And they just adored it. Mm-hmm. Kel, Kel was another, he was just known Kel, and, King Kelly or Kel. And nicknames came in very handy back then. You would see, of course, Anson, who, Cap Anson had a million nicknames. One of them was Baby, and apparently he was given that nickname by Boston fans, and I guess by that too, by Boston, Boston writers picked up on it quite easily. And he always said he didn't mind it, but he also stated that it made him want to play even harder. So I don't think that he really didn't mind it. So, that's the way it goes. So
I recall one of our presentations, I think it was at the Fred, where Bill Lamb did a discussion about Cannonball Crane.
Yeah.
Never being known Cannonball during his career.
Oh.
Or never referred to.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I found that too, and not only that, I mean, Baseball Encyclopedia and Total Baseball is great reading. Just flipping through pages. I mean, I did find a few that way, and then ran back to find, pertinent stories about them in the newspapers just to see that they were actually being used. And some of them, of course, were easy to come up with. For Patsy, for instance, he was quite easy. Tricky Nick is the one that I stumbled over in the newspapers. He was a real gift. He was a wonderful gift, actually. But there were hundreds of them. And the 19th century was such a fertile territory for nicknames that had great allusions. And you did learn a lot. I had no idea about Patsy Bolivar and where that word Patsy, which is still used. And, hey, he's such a Patsy. Well, nobody remembers where it ever came from. But when you dig back far enough, that's where it came from, and it was, highly used ever since. So, who knows what's the next one? But I mean, I can't even really think of people nowadays that have some real solid nicknames attached to them. I guess it's just the art of it is gone, that this was really a 19th century allusion, so to speak.
Joanne, you mentioned Pedestrian. Was that his real name or a nickname?
The Pedestrian?
Yeah.
Blower Brown.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Blower Brown. Because pedestrianism back in the 19th century was a professional sport that in some ways even rivaled baseball during that time.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's a great book, if you can come across it. I passed it on to somebody else in the SABR chapter. But the book is called Pedestrianism.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I did not know that.
Yeah, but it's a fascinating read because it does spend a lot of time talking about the rivalry in sports, actually, between baseball and in the 19th century was a professional sport until gambling ruined it, and it became an amateur sport, the AAU after that happened. But pedestrianism, and there's a lot of interesting characters in that. And Blower Brown was one of the more famous ones in the 1880s into the early 1890s. And his real first name escapes me, but if you do a search in that time frame, go Blower Brown, do a keyword search, you'll come up with him. And so he was quite an interesting guy. But pedestrianism is another little side thing if you want to get off of baseball just for a moment.
Right.
But it's very interesting because it was something that was going on as baseball was coming into professionalism. Pedestrianism was really hot, and it kind of got his start by a man who walked from I think it was from Massachusetts anyway, to Washington, D.C. because he wanted to attend the inauguration of Abraham Lincoln. He didn't make it in time, but that's all part of the story. He made it late, let's put it that way. But pedestrianism is an interesting backstory to the history of sports in America. I highly recommend you look it up.
Okay, thanks, Joanne, very much.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
this is Jim Smith out in San Diego. Can you hear me?
Oh, San Diego, yes.
Hi there. I'm sorry I came in late. Love the presentation. Can I add a possibility to you, Joanne?
Why, sure. I always I make lots of lists. Yes. Yeah.
Back when the world, and pardon me if you already covered this, as I say, I came in late.
Okay.
But, back when the world was young, 1996, we did a SABR volume called Baseball's First Stars. And I did a sketch of a player called Willard Grasshopper Maines.
Yeah. Now, do you know why he was Grasshopper?
Well, he was estimates ranged between 6'2" and 6'4" in height. Probably, and very slender. There's an old Judge card of him where he kind of looks like a grasshopper.
Yes, I mentioned all arms and legs. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And he was the first minor league pitcher to win 300 games.
Oh, yeah. There you go.
So he was a character. So I got intrigued by him in the same way as a nickname struck you. I thought, Grasshopper, I got to track this down. So anyway, kind of fun. And thanks for letting me pop that in.
And that is wonderful. And greetings to San Diego. My brother is out there on Palomar Mountain.
Lovely.
So, yes.
We got snow.
Yeah, did they? Oh.
Yeah, we got 7 inches of snow on Palomar.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. Oh. So thank you very much.
You are very welcome. Thank you.
Yep.
We got somebody.
Another good ambiguous one. Yeah.
The charmer. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
You know, Jim Mutry became the manager of the Giants, in the 1880s, and the Metropolitans just before that. But Mutry's nickname became Truthful Jim.
Oh.
And what I came to realize, of course, I think Chadwick might have put that on him around the mid-1880s. But what I came to realize that it was, of course, not complimentary at all. It actually meant that a guy was a teller of tall tales. And there was. Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Bret Hart, the American, writer of the mid 1800s. He was along with. He had some contact with a fellow out in the San Francisco Bay Area by the name of Jim, who was a teller of tall tales, and that became affixed to a lot of politicians, whose names were Jim, so therefore it wasn't complimentary.
Well, speaking of that, uncomplimentary. There was one player I was trying to look through my notes to see if I could find it, but his nickname was Paris. Okay. And, John Paris Smith, whatever. Anyway, so I saw that when, Total Baseball, I'm going through, why do they call him Paris? So I tracked down his years and everything that he was playing and all that, and luckily found in the paper that the reason why they called him Paris was because he had visited Paris somehow, whatever, he had been to Paris, and he would never stop talking about, well, when I was in Paris, and well, I was in Paris, and in Paris this, Paris that, Paris everything, and it drove everybody crazy, and so they gave it up.
One of our 19th century yes, there it goes. Peter Morris.
Peter.
Bob Carruthers, and of course he was Parisian Bob.
Yeah. You know what? That might have been the one I was thinking of. That's very possible. Very possible.
As an artist.
There could have been many of them. Yeah. I know. I had a huge list of all sorts of people that that had these nicknames. I mean, my God, it went on and on and on. But I do encourage anybody, they have nothing else to do, to go just flip the pages, and you will find before long, and most of them will be before 1920 for sure, very few after, but before that, and then get curious about why is he called that. Some of them stories the stories are very good, some of them are not so. Lately, when the other thing that I have been flipping through and could spend hours on is to go into U.S. patents and look at, do a search with a keyword for baseball. And, Google patents is probably the easiest one to do that on. And let me tell you, previous upcoming attractions, I found some really bizarre connections, or really interesting, some amusing patents that are connected to baseball. No, there's the bats, there's the balls, but there's other stuff too.
Joanne,
yes,
thank you very much.
Oh my gosh, how did we
appreciate it was entertaining and fun, and
we made it.
We appreciate your putting this together. Peter, if you would like to give us the coming attractions.
Okay, so next, Joanne, again, thank you very much.
Oh, you are very welcome, all of you.
So coming up next month, the second Tuesday of December, which is December the 8th, we're going to have Bill Humber with us from Toronto, Canada.
I would never miss that, never.
And if you know Bill, you're in for a very interesting presentation, and a very one that'll be very well received, I'm sure.
Oh yes.
Bill is actually an inducted member of the Canadian Baseball Hall of Fame.
Yes.
So I just like to mention that he is, but everything that any baseball historian would want to be. And he is certainly Canada's premier historian, but his research goes far beyond that.
Yeah.
So Bill will be up in December. His topic is the imaginative, illicit, and improbable life of Bob Addy. So we're looking for Bill to tell us about that. And I'm sure it'll be great. Then in January, we have from the Hall of Fame itself, Tom Schieber coming in to do a presentation that he did at the Fred a number of years ago about Spalding's tour, world tour, 1888-89. And it's an intriguing presentation, because what Tom does, or what he did, was he analyzed from the records of the Hall of Fame a diary that was kept during that tour.
Ooh.
But was never affixed to anyone that wrote it. The author of the diary was unknown, but he had to be a member of the tour, because he follows it throughout. And Tom's investigation and research comes to reveal at the end who eventually who the writer was. So it's a great presentation. Then in February, we have none other than Don Jensen joining us with his presentation. Has done extensive research on what we refer to as the hot dog king. Of course, it's Harry Stevens, who is really the father of sports catering. And in March, we end up with Jerry Casway doing a presentation on, his presentation was titled, "Before there was Greenberg, there was Pike," and meaning Lipman Pike, the first Jewish major leaguer. So it'll be we're warmed up all the way through March, and we'll be putting our heads together for the months to follow. Great. I just want to make a mention here to anybody who's online here at the moment that this week, maybe even tonight, I'll be sending out an email to the registrants of the 2020 Fred that they will be receiving in the mail by next week at the latest, a questionnaire that will both provide them with a refund from the 2020 Fred and also registering them for what we're going to do. We're doing the 2020 Fred in 2021 as a virtual presentation, a virtual conference. Okay. So anyway, that's the latest. So Bob, I have to thank Bob Bailey for this, and yes. it's a great idea and a lot of fun. Thank you again too, Joanne.
Well, I got through on something. Yep. But hey, look at, we'll carry on. Thank you very much for having me.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Joanne.
Our pleasure.
Joanne?
Yes?
Thank you, Joanne. Good to see you all. Hope to see you all next month with Bill's Bob Addy adventure. And y'all have a good night. Have a good Thanksgiving, and all be safe.
Okay, thanks
very
much. Okay, all right.
Joanne, this is Digger from Colorado Springs. So on behalf of Digger, Crush, Long Gone Long, Old Haas, and Yank, and all the crew of us that play, a well done presentation, and huzzah for the national game.
Okay, thanks very much. Have a good night.
Thank you, Roger. I saw you posted in there the Colorado Springs Millionaires. I like to play on that team.
Millionaires.
Yep.
Thank you again.
Okay.
See you next month.
Much. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks a lot. Bye-bye. Bye. Why didn't it work?